Viewers and listeners joining us from different parts of the world, welcome to yet another special edition of the David Chikwaza Global South Indaba. You are watching episode 2 of Speaking from Experience, How to Land a Highly Competitive Scholarship. Today on the Indaba, I am joined by Dr. Primrose Bima of the University of Cape Town, South Africa. She received institution-based funding for her honors and PhD studies, as well as postdoctoral research funding from the University of Cape Town, South Africa. As part of her consulting work, Primrose assists scholarship candidates to develop scholarship and research funding applications. Dr. Prim, welcome to the Indaba.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
In a minute, could you please just reflect on the importance of scholarship educational videos?
I think that scholarship educational videos are very important because they help potential applicants to actually bridge the gap between what they know or what they think they know and what else they should actually know before applying for academic funding, both in general and for specific programs. So during my high school and undergraduate years, for example, between 2005 and 2014, I didn't have any exposure to such content because of the time and the resources that I had. I think I first had access to the internet around 2009 and later gained knowledge about such content around like 2011 when I was applying for universities. So I went through many cycles of rejections and crying and episodes when I told myself like I was not eligible for anything because there was nothing else to help me, because personally I didn't know people in person who had been able to get funding. So I think that those who have the primary resources like a device connected to the internet can make good of such content. I think, in my opinion, scholarship videos help with 3 key ingredients to success. Number 1 is hope and motivation, discovering that you too can because someone else has gone through the process and excelled. And obviously, it becomes your duty to convert that inspiration into action by applying. Number 2 is that there are videos which actually provide information on do's and don'ts, and some of them use experience. The content creators, the ones speaking about their own experiences. So it actually helps you. And then obviously you have to do further research on those do's and don'ts because every other application needs to be customized based on your own needs. And then the third one is that some video content comes with sample application materials. You'll see someone posting a whole application process, how they write CVs, cover letters, interview notes, research proposals, and the like. So I think that it is very important to have such content for these and obviously other reasons that may be outlined by other speakers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prim. I'm also joined by Dr. Anish of PwC Ireland. He got 5 scholarships, partial and full, from universities across the UK and Ireland. He accepted the VV Giri Global Excellence Scholarship to pursue a master's degree at the University College Dublin. In Ireland, he won the prestigious Marie S. Curie Fellowship, the flagship research fellowship program funded by the European Commission, to pursue his PhD in Strategy and Entrepreneurship at DCU Business School, Dublin City University. Anish, welcome and thank you for making the time.
It's honestly a pleasure to be here. Thank you, David, for bringing us all together. It's very difficult to get people from the Global South to sort of come together and, sort of speak something which can be of use to like future applicants. But I hope like all of us will say things that can potentially sort of propel you forward if you are looking forward to applying to scholarship applications. My general background is, from economics, and I have worked on startups. So I have always realized that there is a concept in economics which is referred to as information asymmetry. And one of the reasons why developed economies in general tend to do better than emerging economies like, places where we come from, they have much better channels of sort of transmitting the information from the source to people who really need it. And I think one of the reasons that we have been lagging behind is that you can't really make the argument that people from the global south are not doing well in a lot of different areas. They are, but there is no real platform, so to speak, where they can come ahead and give the information to a much wider set of sort of audience, because we technically we are the majority in the world if you look at it from that perspective. And individual capacity, I'm sure like all three of us have been helping out students, but it's very important to sort of bring this information all together and give it to the applicants. So I think good job there, and it can be really helpful. Network capital, social capital, like if you look at startups, it's all about networks, it's all about social capital. So we are just trying to build on that. And yeah, internet has done well in terms of democratizing information. So I think all of us have benefited from it. So hopefully we will be able to offer you something that can benefit you as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anish. Indeed, the internet equalizes the unequal. Well, I'm just going to move on to Tanatswa. Tanatswa is joining us from Cambridge University, and she won the prestigious Postgraduate Beit-Cambridge Scholarship in 2022, and she's now looking at the prospect of pursuing her PhD. Tanatswa, welcome to the Indaba.
Hi, David. Thank you. And hi, Dr. Anish, Dr. Primrose. Lovely to meet you. And, it's amazing to be with great people. I'm like, wow, it's beautiful. And I think just, adding to what Dr. Primrose and Anish said, I think they said it beautifully, that the internet is an amazing tool. And, these videos or this information does provide hope, inspiration, and guidance. But it's also important for applicants to know that they shouldn't use them incorrectly and be so dependent on them and do a copy paste type of scenario, because I think maybe that's where most people fall short. And it's amazing to see when Dr. Primrose is talking and to then message her on LinkedIn and say, oh, I saw you on David's show, please can you assist me with by going through my personal statement, and if she agrees she can go through it. But you can't say, please, can you give me your personal statement to read? Or you can't look at the tips someone has said and think they will automatically apply to you, because it's not a one size fits all. I've realized that for me personally, if I watch a video or I watch someone or see how maybe someone has done, I'll give a PhD example since I'm still fresh from those applications. When you go on YouTube and you see people preparing for their PhD interviews and doing those PhD slides, they have their own different experiences of how they're going to do their PhD presentation. And people have their own stories as well. And I think with a postgraduate degree, when you decide to take that step, you want to tell your own story. So if you try to listen to someone else's story without seeing the technique, then there's a problem. So the information is great, but look out for the tools and techniques more rather than trying to then copy someone else's story.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Tanatswa. Just a follow-up. I'll give you a minute just to reflect on the importance of social media in popularizing opportunities out there, including scholarships.
So social media is beautiful. I think people like to say it's both good and evil, and I completely agree. If it's used in the right way, it's amazing. And I think with scholarships, sometimes we have people that fall into the when preparation meets opportunity category. You may not know about a scholarship, but you have been preparing your life for the past 4 years. You have been putting in the work. You have been doing your volunteering work and all that. Then you go on Twitter and you see Dr. Anish's Twitter thread telling you that there's an opportunity in Dublin. And you have actually been doing that. You're going to apply, and if it's for you, you will get it. So I think, social media is important to reach the masses. It's important to give that information. And I think it's just similar to what Doc Primrose and Anish said, that it creates that hope. And someone knows that, if this person could do it, then surely I can do it as well. I remember when I was in Form 3, and that's 15 years, Dr. Anish, for Zimbabwe, in high school. When I was in high school, I went on Fadzaima here is Facebook. And I see as an inspiration. I don't know if Dr. Primrose knows her because she's into politics, right? So obviously you guys should know her. This is your field. I went on her Facebook, and obviously, with her posts, the way she would present herself, all I could say is, wow, this woman is well spoken. I want to know why. And I went to see where she had done her studies. She did her bachelor's at the University of Zimbabwe, and she did her master's at the University of Cambridge. And I said, oh my gosh, a Black Zimbabwean woman can do a master's at the University of Cambridge. That is possible. And I saw this on Facebook. I was in awe. I was 15. I was shook. I was like, oh my gosh, I need to have a sit down with her. And at that time, I wanted to pursue law. And then, life happened, and now I'm doing neuroscience, but that's a story for another day. And I had a conversation with her. And the first question I asked her was, I saw on your Facebook that you went to the University of Cambridge. How did it happen? She told me her story. She told me how she got funding for it. And this all came from seeing her Facebook, from seeing what she has achieved. So it definitely gives hope, and it definitely inspires other people that want to also, follow your footsteps. So I think social media is beautiful. And I hope that people that do receive these opportunities, sorry, you said a minute, right? And I do hope that people that do receive these opportunities also highlight on their platforms that they have received these opportunities, because you could literally be that door for someone to also cross the bridge.
I can see that, Tanatswa, you're fired up. And I'm getting fired up too. Thank you so much for that. So now we're just going to move on to the next segment, which is the keynote questions segment. And I'm going to start with Dr. Prim. Dr. Prim, please tell us what the higher education system in South Africa is like. What should people know before they apply for scholarships to an institution in South Africa, be it undergraduate, master's, or PhD level?
Great. Thank you so much, David, once again. So South Africa's higher education system, I think, is currently the strongest on the continent in many ways. It is home to some of the world's top 200 to about 500 universities. So some of the South African universities fall into those categories, according to rankings determined by research outputs, as well as the rankings of the actual teaching and research staff. So there's also the issue of quality of facilities at most of the former, mostly white universities. And there's a lot of innovation that is linked to global trends. For example, your sustainable development goals, your artificial intelligence, your fourth industrial revolution, and whatnot. So it is a go-to place on the continent. And I think one would obviously have to do their own research on which university is best for their own discipline of study, because different universities specialize differently in different areas. The country is home to both academic and research-intensive institutions as well, which have a wide range of disciplines. So there's also technically oriented universities. Personally, I'm an academic in politics and international relations, and I love doing research, which is how I ended up staying at the University of Cape Town, because the emphasis is on being a research-intensive university. So when it comes to scholarships, to be quite honest, from undergraduate level, most people in South African universities, particularly those who are not from South Africa, are self-funded. There's very few undergraduate scholarship programs. I think the most pronounced that I'm very well aware of is the MasterCard Foundation one, which usually takes students to the University of Pretoria and the University of Cape Town. So most non-South Africans are here who are here on scholarships, might be on government-sponsored scholarships. I've met quite a number of Zimbabweans, for example, who come through the presidential scholarship and other funds related to organizations. So for most people who are doing masters, there is funding. I think when you look at undergraduate, masters, and PhD, masters has the highest rates of funding, perhaps even globally as well. So there's a wide range of scholarships with different offerings. And when I say offerings, what I mean is that they provide different amounts. So it costs up to 100,000 rands to do a master's degree per year. But you might find that there's a scholarship for 30,000 rands, a scholarship for 200,000 rands, which is more than enough, or a scholarship that will be pegged to the university and what it is charging you. So you have to be very wary of that. What I do like is that most of the funding opportunities allow you to carry at least 2 scholarships, in particular if one of them doesn't really cater for what you want to do. So before I go to the ones that I attained, in terms of the popular master's level scholarships, I know there's Mandela Rhodes Foundation. I think there's a call that is going to come out soon, and they usually do workshops on how to apply for it. And there's a lot of former Mandela Rhodes scholars who speak about their experiences. It's amazing. It sponsors people across different disciplines. It doesn't matter where you did your undergraduate level studies, and they look at just more than your grades. The other one is Canon Collins, and there's the German-funded DAAD scholarships, as well as National Research Foundation scholarships, which is NRF of South Africa. This provides a wide range of scholarships. So personally, I ended up getting a lot of institution-based scholarships because I got to form strong relationships with my research advisors, and they had access to institutional funding. So it made it easier for me in that regard. But this is information that you don't have at undergraduate level. Most of us, when you come for undergrad, you don't even know that you want to do a master's. You don't even know if you like research or writing a dissertation. So all of these things are far from you. You go to lectures, you see professors, you walk out, you don't even know who your head of department is, not knowing that those are the people that sit in very important meetings. So I think that key success factors when it comes to scholarships do vary. For institution-based ones, applications have to be very strategic, particularly in terms of the reference letters that you get. So, for example, I came to find out that I became one of the preferred candidates for the scholarships that I got because my supervisor at the time was the head of department and his research output was great. I saw some people getting institutional funding because the professors who were supervising them already have access to many funds individually as a professor and also through the university research funding. So usually, like I said again, when you're an undergraduate student, you don't know about this. And when the time arrives to apply, you're at a disadvantage because one, you may email this professor, but they don't know you. And they might just write something that will not really help in terms of applying if they actually help you. So you end up getting reference letters from a tutor or a teaching assistant. And at university level, there's a hierarchy. So you're unlikely to get funding that way. But maybe if that type of person writes a recommendation for you for another type of scholarship, then you might get it. So links with senior academics. And then with regards to scholarships with big names, there's a lot of competition. I think the competition is stiff. So for example, the Mandela Rhodes Scholarship that I mentioned, you'll be in a big pool of applicants. And I've realized with such students that pull through have strong personal statements and research proposals. And those are the key determinants of whether or not you will get funding. I had, for example, this one instance where there's a student who actually got funding, and then for some reason they had a rejection for the academic qualification. So they had to go back to the university to say, well, Mandela Rhodes is offering me a scholarship, but you rejected me for master's. And well, they ended up getting admitted. So it's actually very funny, the differences between how institutions decide and how different funders actually choose. So I think that you need to sharpen your skills at writing applications, get assistance, especially from former applicants. This does increase your chances of getting selected. Otherwise, many people get by getting high grades if the selection team ends up deciding to go with that. And another point of caution, particularly for those applying for masters, usually you're not a refined researcher and you have half-hearted attempts at writing a proposal. That can make or break your application. So you need to do that hard work of acquainting yourself to say, what would a proposal look like, particularly those 1, 2, 3-page concept notes. And you have to do it wholeheartedly. It's not just a draft that you're submitting just so that you enter, because once you get it, you're going to have to deliver on what you said your research is going to focus on. So I think that that's very important. Also important, I realized that I built my CV like Tanatswa was saying. Sometimes you are already prepared and you didn't realize you were preparing. realizing that being a residence mentor, being a tutor, and doing work at the university and being involved, for example, I was the head academic chair of the United Nations Association of South Africa. So if you're doing a PhD in international relations, they want that type of person, someone who has spearheaded a conference over South African universities and all of that. So all those help. But then it's stuff you can't do when you realize there's an opening and there's 2 months for that to close. So always be in that mode of shaping yourself through community service, commitment to developing your career profile as well. So you could be in engineering, do that vacation work, whether it's voluntary or paid somehow. If you're a geek, develop your own projects to solve societal problems. And when you write about that, people are going to have an interest in you. So I think that's what I can say in a nutshell in terms of ways in which one can navigate getting funding within the South African academic space.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prim. Very enlightening. I'm just going to move on to Dr. Anish. Dr. Anish, you were awarded 5 scholarships, which were partial and full, and you settled for the Giri Global Excellence Scholarship. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the Giri correctly, but I hope I am. Could you just tell us or tell our viewers and listeners what the Giri Scholarship is all about? How did you get to find out about it? And who is eligible to apply? And what are the main requirements when applying? And why did you choose this one in particular? I mean, you had a lot of options.
Well, the simple answer is that scholarship was the most generous, so I didn't have to pay any tuition fee. Giri happened to have studied in University College Dublin back in the early 90s. And he was also, fun fact, he was also expelled because he was involved with the Republican forces, which were against the British. But that's a separate conversation. He went on to become the President of India. And in his honor, UCD has a scholarship, which is Giri Global Excellence Scholarship. To be fair, UCD has a whole bunch of Global Excellence Scholarships. And generally, the coverage is that it's 100% tuition fee. So you don't have to pay any tuition fee. You only need to take care of your living expenses. The reason I chose to, so if we start from the very scratch, I did my bachelor's from University of Delhi in India. It's a public university. You don't really pay a lot of tuition fee in India's centrally funded public universities. And I wanted to go abroad to get away from the competition because Indian domestic higher education market is immensely competitive. So I was like, I don't want to sort of get myself engaged into this. Let's explore. Like most Indian kids, UK came to be at the foremost choices. I applied to a whole lot of universities, your usual LSE, King's, Nottingham, Reading. Because my bachelor's was in accounting, finance, and law, I was only applying to business schools. And university rankings can differ to business school rankings. Some universities can be really good, but not have a good business school. For instance, University of Reading has a really good business school, Henley Business School. But the university, it's not that it's not a bad university. It's just that in terms of ranking, it's not quite there. I bumped into Giri scholarship just by chance. A lot of these universities tend to do education fairs in India. I just happened to be attending one of them, and I inquired quite, to be honest, bluntly, with the person who was sitting there, if you have scholarship options, and they told me about it. But they also gave me it was a cautionary suggestion, so to speak. It was like, it's immensely competitive, as you can imagine. Not least because there are too many of us who are applying abroad. Like if I were to put things into perspective, the amount of money that Indian parents are spending for their kids' education in the United States is higher than the entire education budget of India. So you really sort of get a sense of how much money Indians are spending and how many people are moving abroad. So it just so happened that I got a 50% tuition fee scholarship from Henley Business School, and I was quite happy with it. I was going to go ahead with it. But then one fine afternoon, I got an email saying that you have been selected. Now, I know things in UK are a little bit different right now, but when I was applying, there was no stay back. And for me, it was important because I didn't want to be in a position where you go abroad, sort of spend a year, who knows, you end up liking it, and then you have to leave because the political environment doesn't want you to be there. Ireland, in that case, it's still reasonably open. I mean, not reasonably, it's quite open. The economy essentially is built by this idea of having open borders. So yeah, I mean, that's the story with Giri Global Excellence Scholarship. I got it. There were 6 of us. It is it's stream and elastic. So it's not that you'll get it only if you're studying business. One of our sort of other recipients was from chemistry, and the other one was from civil engineering. In terms, if I were to give you tips, now again, quite practical, I'd say apply the moment sort of application opens. The earlier you apply, I believe the stronger chances you have. And my hunch is that universities feel that if you are applying, so for instance, if the application were to open in the first week of September and you made an application, let's say 2nd or 3rd week of September, to the people who are receiving these applications, they are thinking, okay, for this student, we are the first priority. Because if we were not the first priority, he or she wouldn't make the effort to sort of apply this early. I mean, this is just a hunch of like applying like multiple scholarships and getting them. So apply early. Another thing would be like, as Tanatswa was highlighting, it's very important to tell your own story. And I always encourage people to be innovative about it. I have not really, I don't really have experience of applying to need-based scholarship because, to be honest, frankly, I don't deserve it. There are people who deserve it more, and you should be considerate of that. You should think about those things. But in terms of merit-based scholarship, you really need to tell the universities what value you're going to add. How are they going to benefit? Because you need to, I'm sorry to say this, but you need to understand it's a business. They benefit from us being in the university because it helps them in their rankings. So if Tanatswa is studying from Cambridge, she's capable of studying in Cambridge, she has done really well, but not only she is benefiting, University of Cambridge is also benefiting. And for us, like students who are coming from Global South, it's very important because the insecurity is systemic. It is very difficult for us to believe that we can be of value to anybody else. But that's not the case. Like if you look at the rankings in especially Financial Times, 20% of the weightage is given to how many international students you have. A huge, I think 10% of the weightage is given to how many female faculty you have. Yes. So it's very important to understand that you can add a lot of value and think from that perspective. Tell the story that you really want to tell. Be honest. And I cannot repeat this enough. It's a very good point. It was mentioned earlier. Do not copy and paste. It's not going to work out. You're going to be thrown out. You'll feel dejected. And if I were to give you a final, and this, I'll come back to this when I talk about Marie Curie, don't be disheartened. And it's a financial sort of advice. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Apply to as many scholarships as you can. You will be surprised. Like good news most often comes from the areas you least expect it to come. Like when I had failed at getting 100% scholarship at Nottingham University, and I also failed at Great India. LSE was simply too expensive. I was not in a position to pay £20,000, and then you have to live in London. You pay another additional £10,000 and they don't offer you stay back. So that was a no. So I was reasonably disheartened, but I was like, okay, we have a 50% scholarship, so we'll go with the Henley Business School one. And then in that moment of sort of, arguably grief, I receive an email from this university in Ireland that, okay, we are going to give you 100% scholarship. So don't be disheartened. Keep your options open. There is no such thing as a good university, bad university. As long as you are in the top 500, as long as you are committed to your sort of learning, as long as you're passionate about what you do, like go for it. It's very important. And just the final, I think it's very important to highlight if you look at internationally, especially from the countries that we come from, the capability of dreaming of our children has been systematically demolished. All I want you to do is dream. And don't be like rational in your dreams. Dreams are supposed to be irrational. If you want to become, today you are 26, 27, 19, if you want to become an astronaut, believe that you will become an astronaut. If someone tells you won't become an astronaut, shut them down. Mute them. Dream. It's very important for our children to dream and to believe that they can do anything that they want to do. There is Literally nobody's stopping you. So because that's the first step. The moment you believe that, okay, this is going to happen, then only you start working towards it.
Just before I move on to Tanatswa and bring in Tanatswa, just a few more follow-up questions for you, Dr. Anish. Who's eligible for this kind of scholarship, the VV Giri or Giri Global Excellence Scholarship? Who's eligible, and what are the requirements? Maybe just in brief.
So no, I should have highlighted that. So as I said, UCD has a range of global excellence scholarships, which is basically open to people from all the countries. The Indian one is specifically called the VV scholarships. And then if you go to the business school, they have multiple other 50%, 25%, 20%. They have a range of scholarship. I would highly encourage you to serve through it if you are from that sort of background. In terms of eligibility requirement, you need to have a bachelor's degree. Again, an important factor, like I did not consider going to the US because Indian education system, we have a bachelor's degree of 3 years. Now, some universities, some courses are 4 years long, which then enable those students to qualify for higher education in USA. But in my case, it was a 3-year bachelor's program. And that's one of the reasons also why I was considering Europe. So it's fairly open. VV is fairly open. Global excellence is fairly open to students from all the countries. VV just happens to be the Indian edition of it.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Anish. I'm just going to bring in Tanatswa. Tanatswa, I noticed in your bio that you awarded the Postgraduate Beit-Cambridge Scholarship in 2022. Could you tell our viewers and listeners the most important requirements specific to this application? And of course, just share with them as well your application experience.
Before I get into your question, I just want to quickly comment on what Dr. Anish said, that if someone tries to bash your dreams, mute them. I remember when I told this lady who I went to church with that I was coming to do my postgraduate at the University of Cambridge, because before applying, I told her that after I finished doing my bachelor's, I'm going to apply to the University of Cambridge or the University of Oxford. That those were the only two institutions I told her. There was no two way about it. And after I told her that I got in, she said to me, "Oh my gosh, Tanatswa, you got in. You know, when you told me that you were applying to these institutions, I was like, this girl is crazy. How can she think about going to those big institutions?" In my head, I'm thinking, okay, so when I was telling you, you actually thought I was just dreaming and it was not going to become a reality. So definitely be careful of people like that in your life that will try to, take away your dream or take away your hope. But getting into the Byte Trust Scholarship. So the Byte Trust provides scholarships to students in Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi that want to go to specific Byte Trust institutions in the UK and in South Africa. So the partner institutions in the UK, from the top of my head, I hope I did not forget, but there's the University of Cambridge, University of Oxford, University of Edinburgh, University of Glasgow, University of Leeds, and then there's the University of Strathclyde. I hope I didn't forget, but those are the institutions that are there in the UK. And then in South Africa, there's Rhodes, there's University of Cape Town, and there's Stellenbosch. So before you apply for the Byte Trust Scholarship, you have to get a conditional offer from the institutions you're applying to. So they do encourage you to apply to a lot of institutions in case one other institution fails. You've got other institutions as well that may also accept you. So if you get your conditional offer, you then do your scholarship application. And applicants have to be below the age of 30 if they're not medical doctors or vets. And if they are medical doctors or vets, they have to be below the age of 35, and they need to do 18 months internship and then one rural posting. They prefer rural posting in their area or any other posting, really. I don't know how it works with the vets and the medical doctors, but I'm sure they understand the language. And those are some of the requirements. You need to have relevant work experience, but really, I think with the work experience, it's subjective because it really depends also with your grades, because for your grades, you need to have a first-class degree or a second upper class. So it just depends. I have met scholars that had a second upper class and really strong work experience. And then I've met scholars that had a first class and not that much work experience. I myself, I don't know what category to put myself in because I feel like I've been working for the longest time of my life and I'm only 23. So I think it really depends. And with the experience, I will say that scholarships are very different, like what Dr. Prim and Anish said. And with some scholarships, good grades are not enough. Yes, you have your good grades. Perfect. Everyone else has good grades. So us saying, I know we say it's a criteria. So us saying, have good grades, I mean, we're just going to put it there. But everyone else is academically there. So you need to make sure that your personality comes out. What do you want to do? Why do you even want this funding? Like what Dr. Anish said, that it's a business. Some people want scholarships so that they can just get out of their countries. If that's what you want in your head, you're not going to get it. Or at least not the ones that are very competitive, because there are different ones that are out there. You need to be someone who has that dream. You have that vision and you know what it is that you want to do and you want to tell your story. Why, if someone says to you, why should I invest 50,000 pounds in you? Like, why should I just give you just 50,000 pounds for 1 year for you to do your studies, live in Europe and visit all these other beautiful places? You need to have something. Your answer needs to be worth 50,000 pounds. Basically, that's all we're saying. If I ask you why and you've got 2 minutes to respond, let your answer be worth 50,000 pounds. And I think it's important for me to highlight that if you do want universities like Cambridge or Oxford, because I'm not sure about the other institutions, you have to be aware that these institutions have funding deadlines within their institutions. So I have met people that have wanted to apply for this particular scholarship, but they missed the funding deadline for the University of Cambridge or Oxford. So the funding deadline for Cambridge is usually the 1st of December or the 6th of January of the year you want to start. And then they've got their course deadline. So people don't know this information because maybe for University of Leeds, it may be one deadline, but Cambridge and Oxford, they have a different way of doing things. They've got funding deadlines. And because with the Beit Trust, they are partner institutions, it then becomes the Beit-Cambridge Scholarship, Beit Oxford, or Beit Leeds. It then just depends where you then end up. So know the university that you want to go to. And I think for me, with my experience, it was a roller coaster to say the least. I had so many rejections before applying for this particular scholarship. And I applied for the Beit Trust 24 hours before it was closed. And that's because when I applied for my master's program, I applied 24 hours before the funding deadline myself. Not that I didn't know there was a funding deadline. I knew. I mean, I started the application 3 months in advance, but I received 2 rejections prior to that. And I got so disheartened and demotivated. And I was like, you know what? I just don't know anymore. Is my application not good enough? But then someone told me, sometimes you don't choose scholarships. Scholarships choose you. As funny as that may sound, I actually think that it's true. And I decided, you know what, let me put in the application. Yes, that other scholarship failed, but I still think that my ideas are worth 50K. So I'm going to give it another shot. And thankfully, I got my conditional offer before the Beit Trust deadline, and I managed to submit my application, which is why it's so important to also apply early, because you need that conditional offer to meet the Beit Trust deadline. So it's very, very important to just have your things in order and to also have good relationships with your lecturers. I think, Dr. Prem said it perfectly. Know your lecturers and let your lecturers know you as well. Because when you want that reference letter, it's important. I didn't even know that a reference letter was that important. Only after I came to Cambridge and, I was then told, oh, you had pretty good referees. I was like, wait, you actually look at that? I thought it was just me alone that you look at. But the reference letters are so important. I also realized when I was also doing the PhD applications that they matter and they are so important. Who you put up there and who writes what about you and what is it that you have been doing. Because if you just ask any lecturer who taught you perhaps in your first year to write a reference letter, they may just say, okay, yes, she was a good student, full stop, ends there. But what about if you were spearheading some mental health campaigns in your institutions and they put that there? Or it gives it a punch. At least I think it does. I don't know. Say that you can get multiple no's and you can cry a lot, but it takes 1 year to transform your life. And be actively involved in building your CV. It may seem like it doesn't make sense to you to do any volunteering work or any advocacy work or speaking out to going on all these shows. From my first year, I had people that would say, why do you even do all this volunteering? Because I'm passionate about mental health. Why do you even do mental health advocacy? It doesn't bring you any money. Why are you doing it? Well, I mean, 4 years later, it brought me 50K pounds. So I don't know what you mean. It doesn't bring you any money. So really just be very intentional about what it is that you want to do. And I think if you're 19, for example, start working for a scholarship at the age of 19. For me personally, I started thinking about scholarships when I was in my first year of university, when I was 19 years old, because I knew the path I wanted to take. I may not have known which area I was going to fall into, because there was clinical psychology there, then neuropsychology, and then I had to find my purpose in there. But I knew that I wanted to do a bachelor's degree, and then I wanted to do a master's, and I wanted to do it at a top leading university. That I knew. And I knew, for that to happen, I needed a scholarship, because I mean, where are we going to get 35,000 pounds from? So I was very intentional about getting those grades from my first year, and also very intentional about being actively involved in the civic space, in advocacy work, in doing volunteering, and in just building my CV, and also identifying the gaps in the community. What do I want to do with this program? Because at the end of the day, yes, they are making an investment in you, but imagine 12 months gone and you don't even do anything where you are, where you come from. You don't establish anything, and you've spent 12 months learning, and then you don't even leave a legacy. No, you can't be that person. So also identify gaps and have that vision. But yeah, that's a bit about my experience and what the Beit-Trust requires.
I'm just going to start with Dr. Anish. Is there anything that you'd like to reflect on that has been mentioned by your fellow panelists?
On the PhD thing, I wanted to a little bit on the Marie Curie fellowship. I think Tanatswa would know it a little bit more, because it just happens to be the flagship sort of research funding program of the European Union. But the issue with Marie Curie is that you can't really apply for it directly. So if you are a graduate master student who wants to apply for a Marie Curie, generally what happens is a bunch of universities come together, they write a proposal, they submit it to the European Commission, then they get the funding, and it's quite generous. It's like in my case, the funding, and I can say this because it's the public domain, it was 3.8 million euros. The pay is very generous. The research funding is very generous. In our case, we had DCU in Ireland, we had King's in London, Heidelberg in Germany, IBE in Spain, and University of Warsaw in Poland. So you can't really apply for it directly, but have a look at websites such as Acadius, that is akadeus.com. They have openings from all across the world. I have found that LinkedIn jobs can be quite useful if you use the right keywords. Twitter is incredible, but I would recommend you to follow academics on Twitter, because there is a lot of things that you don't really want to follow. And it's a great platform to sort of learn about opportunities. Build a network. It's really important. Build a network, push people forward. If someone is next to you, they want to do something, the only way you excel in life is by making sure that people around you excel. And I'm going to give some Indian philosophy, right? And that's why I think this is going to be really helpful for you, because, and I'm pretty sure Dr. Prem knows it, because we have applied to journals for articles, and they have completely, in my case, there are cases where you get complete desk reject. So the tricky bit is one of the central tenets of Indian philosophy is keep doing your work, don't expect any outcome. And then Buddha sort of extends that philosophy, which says, and the reason you should not expect any outcome, because expectations lead to desire, and as we all know, desire is the root cause of all suffering. So that is Indian philosophy 2000 years ago. But this is a very different world. It's a world dominated by big capital. I would highly encourage you to consider the outcome at least before you get into something, unless that something is a thing you are passionate about. Tanatswa said she's passionate about mental health advocacy. When you're doing that kind of work, don't expect anything in return. But in general, everything that you do, be at least very cautious of what you're going to get in return. Besides that, I think, like if you follow cricket, you can make 100 different applications. You can get rejected from 99 of them. But honestly speaking, you just really need one. And so like your chances of success are quite high. Like the more you sort of spread yourself, the better chances you'll have. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, as you very rightly pointed out. And I think that is very important. I started looking at moving abroad when I was in my second year. So it's a process. Like most things in life, it takes time. The key thing is not to be disheartened, to reach out to people. If you're messaging people on LinkedIn, because I reached out to a lot of entrepreneurs on LinkedIn for interview, I had really nothing to offer to them in return. So keep it short. Keep the message short. Don't like long messages to people on LinkedIn, because honestly, no one wants to read it. I'll just be, and this is the feedback that I have gotten from entrepreneurs. I was trying to talk to people whose net worth was 300 million, and I was just like a student trying to talk to them, and they were like, but they were still nice. So like most people will help you. Sometimes people won't offer you any help, but that's okay. I mean, everybody's busy. There is a platform, especially for, again, students from economics kind of background. If you're applying to, there is a forum called Econ Job Rumors. That is incredibly helpful because it's essentially people coming together to share information. Reddit, I find, is incredibly useful if you're following the right thread. But the essence is like we had one of our professors during my bachelor's, and she used to say that in order to succeed in today's world, I mean, 90% is hard work, or 10% is hard work, but 90% is network. So the stronger your network is, the higher the chances are that you are going to succeed. So make sure that you build. But yeah, I mean, it's been really nice. Awesome stories.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Anish. I'm just going to move on to Dr. Prim. I'm going to bring in Dr. Prim to just reflect on some of the things that have already been shared, either by Tanatswa or by Dr. Anish. Dr. Prim, it's your time.
So I think one of the most important things that I came to realize is someone told me that there is a type of profile for different types of scholarships. And so sometimes it does help to check out who are the 2022, 2021 scholars, what have they done, or what is the common thread? Because sometimes it might be a matter of actually applying to the wrong types of scholarship that can lead to different types of disappointments. So actually knowing your own strengths. So for example, with me, I failed to get master's funding from the university, which had given me honors funding, by the way, and I had like the best results ever. And I had also applied to many different types of scholarships. But then I realized that with the type of research I was trying to do, I wanted to do research that was linked to South Africa's management of migrants. Now, I realized that it was probably the wrong type of application to the National Research Foundation. They probably don't have an interest in that at the time, in as much as Dr. Anish spoke about business, there's also the politics of different types of scholarships. So you have to find yourself in the theme of a scholarship. If it's a scholarship that looks, for example, into community service in particular areas, where do you stand when you look at a Tanatswa's profile and their work in mental health within the community and the type of volunteerism you say you've been doing? So I think sometimes there's that level of honesty you may need to exercise, especially when you have so many things you can apply for, and trying to sift out what you should and you should not apply for. And as much as we encouraged everyone to just apply for everything and everything that comes up, sometimes you get application fatigue. So you have to save your best energy for what suits you best. And then, you can then apply for the rest of them. So when I actually wanted to now do my PhD, I was like, you know what, I need to look at something that's very topical and situate myself in my field. People speak about needing more women in politics and international relations. So how I sell myself is not going to be a Zimbabwean who's passionate about the lives of migrants living in South Africa. No, I'm interested in being a woman in politics in Africa and seeing the gaps that we can fill, especially in the area of peacemaking. That benefits South Africa, that benefits Southern Africa, Africa, and the rest of the world. And my topic was just that something that had to follow along those lines, but my selling point changed because I had realized that and had also been sitting in on conversations. So it actually does help to have that talk with yourself, but you can only have that after applying and failing. And then networking, as has been mentioned, is very important. And the strategies, there's many, but sometimes you never know. I was a very shy undergraduate and honors student. And I think for me to get to where I got to, it took people that saw something in me. And I'm grateful they did. So for example, I was part of a young women's leadership project. We were doing research, we were writing papers. And the project leader was like, Primrose will do so well, you know, as a postgraduate student. And I was like, I don't know how to write. And then she says, no, you're writing well. We're doing these projects. We've got a publication. But I didn't even see that in me. I think what then helped was when I now needed a reference letter, I remembered, oh yeah, Prof. So-and-so said this. Then I went to them for that reference letter and it sold me well. But I think that what should have happened was me realizing that I was in these young women's leadership and research groups. And that's something I could actually have crafted and put into my own letters, but someone had to put it in their reference letter. So your reference letters, yes, can bridge a gap between what you mention and what other people see in you, which is why I think they're very important. And like Tanatswa said, who you get them from is also very key. Regarding social media, it can be overwhelming, but definitely follow relevant accounts of academics, of people who've gotten prestigious scholarships, also of universities, of different funding offices or different scholarship grants, so that your updates are flooded with that more than by gossip. So I think it's very important to curate your social media in that way. It definitely does help. I think those are the submissions I can make in response to the overall discussion.
Grant, thank you so much, Dr. Prim. Lastly, I'm just going to bring in Tanatswa once again. Tanatswa, I'm just going to give you this time to reflect on what has been said by Dr. Prim and, of course, Dr. Anish.
Thank you. Do you hear that Dr. Prim is a woman, in international relations? She said submissions. You see the terminology tells you that, okay, this person is into the international relations, politics space, and, climate change. You hear it with the terminology. It's beautiful. I think for me, I will say that, firstly, don't take it personal. The worst thing you can ever do, is like have a grudge with a specific funder. Sometimes, to be honest, you fit the criteria, like you actually fit it. Perhaps they want leadership, you tick the box. They want academics, you tick the box. Sometimes you may tick all boxes, but perhaps it's just not for you, and it doesn't take away from your quality, no, as a candidate or who you are as an applicant. It just means that, okay, maybe you are doing research in mental health and the funder wants to fund climate change. Doesn't mean that you're not, you're not like top tier. It just means you're not their target market at that particular time, and it's okay. Let it not stop you from working continuously. And this is something that I've had to learn myself, that no matter how many no's you receive, it doesn't mean that you're not worth all those great things. It doesn't mean that you're not, you can't achieve what it is you want to achieve. It doesn't mean you should stop working towards your goals. You need to have so much resilience, and I think that is what the scholarship process teaches you as an individual, being resilient. And I completely agree with Dr. Anish that you need to have a specific outcome. Expect something. Even in my field of work, I have expectations. I have so many expectations that I also have. And I think just something I want, the viewers to know is your story can be so powerful. It can make or break you in anything that you do. Even if you are someone who's watching this and you don't want a scholarship in particular, but you want funding for your own startup business, how you pitch yourself can make a difference. And I think that's how we need to approach our scholarship applications. What's your selling point? What do you want to do? What do you want to say? How are you being creative and innovative? How are you being different? Personally, for me, the reason why I decided to pursue this MPhil in neuroscience is because I just, you want something that challenges you and something that gives you that opportunity to actually make a difference. When you keep on saying the same things, and I'm not saying they are not good, don't want anyone to then say I don't appreciate the work that's being done. But you get to a point where you're like, I want something different. And no one is giving it to me. So I want to be the difference. And I think when you have that attitude, no matter how many no's you get, you'll keep on going until you find someone to believe you. So remember, it only takes 1 year to transform your life.
It only takes 1 year to transform your life. Thank you so much for that, Tanatswa. Well, it has been really an enlightening discussion. And I want to say a very big thank you to our panelists, but we are not yet done. We are still going on. So we are now approaching the closing remarks segment. And I'm just going to bring in Dr. Prim once again to submit closing remarks. Dr. Prim, what happens after graduation? Does the South African system absorb international students? Are there any specific requirements set out for recent graduates to permanently or temporarily settle or work in South Africa?
Nice one. It's a question which triggers me. So one thing we have to note, which I think I was a bit ignorant about, is that countries that receive a lot of international students get excited when this is happening and oftentimes create incentives. I think the UK has done this before. So prior to the 2nd of February 2022, South Africa had a framework which allowed for people that had graduated to have access to what was called a critical skills visa, where you could look for work within the Republic for at least 1 year. And even if you don't get a job in that 1 year, you could reapply on condition that you had access to funds to stay in the Republic to continue looking for work, particularly for PhD holders and people that had masters that belonged to a list of critical skills. But that has since stopped. So what this means is that according to new regulations, if you want a critical skills work visa, you have to have a job offer. So that also blocks, for example, access to permanent residency, because prior to that, when you have a critical skills work visa, you could apply for permanent residency and it was smoother than the process is now. Now, we live in a climate where most jobs, if you see the applications, yes, it says ideally South African citizens or permanent residents, but where are the permanent residents going to come from? So maybe South Africa realized that it had reached a cap of the permanent residents it wants in the country at the moment to actually be applying for jobs. And then when it comes to offers, I've received numerous offers, and at the offer table, it's like we've waited for some people to get visas for 6 to 8 months. We can't take that business risk with you. So we have to, rethink this acceptance, and we can't go forward. So it is very sad that things have come to this. There are people, though, that depending on what they study and the demand, of course, I'm in humanities, the demand is probably lower for researchers and think tanks, for example. But I've spoken to people who are doing amazing cancer research who had to go back home because they couldn't get a visa. But South Africa would benefit from that. So those are some of the challenges that are currently within the South African climate. They have a shortages of teachers and nurses, but the same people can't get visas, after graduating with a B.Ed or a bachelor's in nursing. So currently things are a bit tight. But prior to this, things were different. So we were all hoping post-graduation, this is what is going to happen. So always have backup plans if you're going to study in a country that's not your own, because things do change. And I think we are watching the Canadas, the Australias, the UKs of this world, and you can never know what will happen if you're doing a program that takes 3 to 5 years. Things do change. So I think people that have much hope, usually I've seen people within engineering and people in the IT sectors, they belong to companies that have the funds to, support you legally in getting these types of critical skills visas and types of permits. Absorption of international students, if you want to practice law, that is not possible at all in South Africa. You have to be a citizen. So that's also another area where if you want to specialize, maybe you're going to be doing it maybe as a researcher, but not necessarily to practice as a legal professional. So what I can say is that it takes a while to also settle in a space. And sometimes you've invested years here, you've forged friendships, some people, meet partners and whatnot. And those are some of their roots to now continuing to stay in the country. So what I want to say is it's not easy. But at the same time, maybe you need to also observe that South Africa is also changing on a day-to-day basis. Look at the current electricity crisis. Is this the type of economy also you want to be in? I saw the Zimbabwean story, having been born in 1992. So there's some things also that are triggering me. And I'm like, if you're not seeing red flags, girl, I don't know what's happening. So I think it's also important to think about it as I'm grateful. I got funding from a South African university or the National Research Foundation. Unfortunately for them, they're not going to reap the benefits of my qualifications because I'm going to have to go elsewhere where I'm more acceptable and where I can actually take my expertise and my exposure from South Africa, learn in new spaces. But also that means that where you go, you may have to start off from backwards, Yes, you have a master's and a PhD, but it means something different to have those qualifications from South Africa when you move into a European context. So to also be wary of those things that you may have to experience as adjustments. So I think that's my last note. South Africa is still a good place to pursue postgraduate studies. If you come from Africa, particularly from Southern Africa, the proximity to home does so much for you. Sometimes you're frustrated, you can go home, or you're more likely to bump into people that speak the same language or meet people of the same faith or church. Those are all things that actually matter for your overall well-being sometimes. And also, if you want to do Africa-centric research with experts on the African continent, in medical research, in the social sciences, wherever, those are things that you still need to look out for. And yeah, you may just have to lower your expectations a bit in terms of wanting to stay on, because the problem of high unemployment, underemployment is also local here as well. So I think that's my realistic parting note in regards to South Africa's academic climate.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prim, for such honesty. I believe it's also beneficial to our viewers and listeners to have a balanced view as to what it means when you're considering to study or to take up funding in South Africa. So thank you so much. I'm just gonna bring in Tanatswa. And Tanatswa, from your engagement with young people, where do you think young people are in the knowledge about existing scholarship opportunities? How do you think Global South opportunities can better serve them in this regard?
The unfortunate part about life is unless you have links or exposure to certain groups of people, you're not going to have this knowledge. You're not going to know about it. Even if you're on the internet 24/7, like what Dr. Prim said, you may be focusing on the wrong things, focusing on gossip and knowing, the latest trends, but you may not have this information at your disposal. And this is something that, I've realized, in my interaction with young people, and I've made it, a must for me to share some of the opportunities I've had and the opportunities that I see with the young people that are in my circle and the young people, that may be watching from, the outside, because it's so important for young people to know that they can be anything they want to be as long as they put in the work. And I think that's the problem, with most of our young people. they don't want to work. People don't want to work because it's painful. It is very, very painful. It's not easy. I'll give a typical example of volunteering and, going to do an activity for 8 hours. And obviously with some organizations, I know myself, we are just starting as an organization. I started a youth-led mental health organization a year and a half ago, and we don't have any funding. And it's purely based on volunteer work. Sometimes we get funding, sometimes, small grants, sometimes we don't. It's very difficult. And we still have people that do the work. And it's not easy doing that 8 hours. I technically as Tanatswa, I have a 9 to 5 and I have no salary for that 9 to 5. Okay. So you can just imagine. So I think young people, number one, some of them don't know about these opportunities that are there. Some of them actually don't know the tools they need for these opportunities. Because yes, you may know that you can apply for this particular scholarship, but you actually don't know what you need to put in your application, or you haven't been preparing for that. When preparation meets opportunity, yes, you can see that there's funding for this year, but perhaps you need to use this year to work on your CV. And it's the hard reality. You have to be very honest with yourself. So I think we definitely need to do a lot of awareness, and I think this show is a great platform for young people to learn, because not only are they getting the knowledge on the types of funding that's available, but they're also getting to know what it is they need to prepare for this funding. And also, I will close by saying, find a mentor. Finding a mentor is so important. It's something that personally I struggled with in this particular space, in the space I'm in, because when I started mental health advocacy, I didn't even know any other mental health advocate, to be fair. No one was talking about it. It's now different. After COVID hit, people became more aware about why mental health is so important. But when I started it, no one was there. And even just finding a mentor, like in the neuroscience field, particularly an African female. And the reason why I'm being so particular about, these things is because that is what I am. I am an African female. And if I'm able to see that another African female can get up there, it hits differently from seeing someone else who does not have the same background or the same roots as I have. So I think that this is a great platform, because we have young people from our different countries that can see that, okay, you did it. Dr. Anish did it. So I can do it. What's stopping me from doing it? And I can get guidance from him. So do young people know about these opportunities? Not a lot of them. It depends. And I think those that do know, some of them are in a position of privilege, because there are so many brilliant minds that are there, so much talent that's there in our communities. And I've seen this with some of the community work I've done. We have great talent, great minds, but exposure is what's not there, unfortunately.
Grant, thank you so much, Tanatswa. So last but not least, I'm just gonna give this opportunity to Dr. Anish to talk to us about, the scholarship applications that he has made. He made 2 particular scholarships. Dr. Anish, what were the most critical documents, in brief, that were required in your scholarship applications?
In terms of VV Giri, so the thing with VV Giri is that you need to have, you firstly apply for a position at UCD, and then you apply for the scholarship. So the reference letters and stuff, they all go with your application, your transcript, obviously. And then for the scholarship, you need to write a personal sort of statement as to why you should be considered for the scholarship. With Marie Curie, again, it depends on so Marie Curie is a funding that any institution can get, and it depends on the institution what they are looking from you. In my case, it was a research statement and it was a proposal. It was a research proposal. The thing with me is I have been fairly non-traditional. My PhD was very non-traditional. My background is very non-traditional. The first piece of research I ever did was in the first year of my PhD. Before that, I had not written. In my bachelor's time, I was engaged with BBC India. It's a very non-traditional, non-academic sort of path to a PhD. But this is something that I have learned, and I want to bring in what Dr. Prim and Tanatswa highlighted. And this is something that you learn because it's an ongoing process. I had recently made the application for the World Bank Group Young Professional Program. And these are the learnings from that experience. In terms of competition, just to give you a sense, like around 10,000 applicants apply and there are 40 odd positions. But when the other panelists were speaking, I was thinking, we come from part of the world, and as Tanatswa highlighted, that even within countries in the global south, there are hierarchies. At least in my case, I can say I come from a place of privilege. But what I want to really sort of relay this information and tell to the people who are listening to us, that if you happen to be from a marginalized community, if you happen to be from an economically sort of weaker group, if you have been sidelined due to anything, your religion, your language, your custom, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, the very first step, and again speaking from an Indian experience, is to get over the stigma, because oftentimes what happens, it's so much shame in accepting, and it takes a lot to accept that you, like in my case, I come from a region which has been affected with insurgency for a very long time. But in order to accept it in front of a group of people, it takes a lot of courage. So I think one part of it is to get over that stigma, accept that reality. And the second bit, which I think is very important, and Dr. Prim highlighted it, is not to address it too much, like address it to an extent, but then come from a solution-oriented point of view, especially in a personal statement that, okay, I grew up in this part of the world. There was a lot of violence. There's a lot of systemic inequality. But here's my story, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is the reason you should take me. So if you take that approach, I think you're more likely to have an impact. And besides that, I mean, as far as the documentation is concerned, I believe that in most scholarship, at least the scholarship that I have sort of applied for, that personal statement bit is the most important bit. In my case, to be fair, it also helped that I was from UCD Smurfit, because it's the best business school in the country. I remember when I had applied for it, I was not the first priority candidate. There was another candidate, but he for some reason could not join. So then they reached out to me, they're like, are you still interested? And then I said yes. But when I talked to my supervisor at a later stage, she was like, part of the reason we were so convinced is because you were from UCD Smurfit. So you never really know what clicks, It's almost like you're trying to find an equilibrium. Like in an economy, like people joke about this, that economists are never right about inflation forecasting, but they're never right about when the recession is going to come. But that's because that's not the job of economists. At least as far as our job is to explain everything that has happened before today, and to tell us that how you can do it better. So it's really sort of like an open game. You never really know what clicks, but it's very important to sort of be focused. Tanatswa said there is no alternative to hard work. I know I said that you need a network, but let's just be honest. If you want to get a PhD degree, you need to write 90,000 words. There is no two way about it, and you need to have publication if you want to have a career in academia. If I can take the liberty and be vulnerable, like as far as I'm concerned, I did my PhD. Again, speaking from a place of privilege, my degree is reasonably employable. So I'm just sort of, in this in between phase. I don't really know what to do with my life, and that's okay. Like, you don't necessarily have to have it all sorted. Sometimes things can be tough. You're like, what am I doing? I did a PhD, and now I'm, a financial services consultant. Want me to have a look at I'm happy to do it. I have also brought together a bunch of, academics, especially PhD researchers and women researchers from my part of India. And we are trying to set up a Google Drive. We can put all our stuff so that people can look at it and speak, if possible, in the language that is spoken in that region. Because there is also a language hegemony that comes into play. Like information, the language of information is English. I have my own reservations about the entire thing. But yeah, I mean, just keep at it. It works out at the end. You never know what's going to happen.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Anish. Well, a very big thank you to you, our panelists, and a very big thank you as well to our viewers and listeners who took the time to join us. Do not forget to subscribe to this channel for more videos, educative videos such as this one. Also remember to visit our website, which is www.globalsoutopportunities.com for global opportunities, including scholarships, fellowships, jobs, internships, grants, and funding. We also accept, review, and publish opinion articles which are very critical as well when you're applying for any scholarship. They want to see what have you written, what has been published in your name. So we do offer that as well. And you can contact us for more information regarding that through our admin at globalsouthopportunities.com.